Thank you, and welcome to the Vista PSO Blend Facilitator Onboarding webinar. This is Amy Kanata, and I'll be your host for today's session. Thank you all for participating in our engagement chat. I noticed that folks are excited about teaching online and looking forward to expanding your skills and also translating our beloved PSO curriculum to an online audience. So thank you all for your positive thoughts. In general, I'd just like to say, as you know, this is a pilot, and with all pilots, there will be wonderful successes and probably many challenges as we go. And so we're really glad to have old friends with us as we embark on this new endeavor. So for today, we will be doing the following. We'll be doing an overview of both the team and the model, talking about roles and expectations, looking at the course just at a high level at a glance. We'll be talking about the Synchronous events, which are mainly webinars. And then Scott will be giving you a Moodle tour, and Bethany will be giving you a tour of the Facilitator Lounge, which is also in Moodle. And then we'll talk about the type of support you'll be receiving and next steps for self-study. And then we'll end today's session with Q&A. So we ask that if you have questions, if you go ahead and just type those into the chat panel as we go. We can go through that list at the end of the session, and then also if you want to ask questions verbally, we'll unmute the phone line so you can do that. So please go ahead and just enter your questions in the chat panel, and be sure to send those to all participants so that everyone can see your question. And if you have an emergency question, feel free to raise your hand, and otherwise we'll do questions at the end. Okay, so I wanted to introduce you all to your team. I think some of you may have picked up on who's on the team based on emails, but if not, here's our team. We have two cohorts, a West cohort and an East cohort. And so you'll sort of know who to expect will be joining you on webinars and also who's in sort of your team. Of course, as a group, all 12 of us are a team, so we encourage you to lean on each other, and we'll talk a little bit more about tools to do that as we go. We've assembled a wonderful community, and we have tools for building a learning community that will document our pilot and a resource that we can use later with new teams, and that is the Facilitator Lounge, and Bethany will be talking a lot more about that in a few minutes. And this lounge is really similar to what we have with the VFC. So again, as we go through this pilot, part of what we want you to do is help us document key learnings and tips and tricks and all of those things that will make it better the second time around. So I wanted to just reiterate a little bit about the blend model. So this is sort of how it works and looks on paper. Basically, members will be doing pre-service online courses and paperwork prior to their official start date. And for this session, that will be February 22nd, which is also the first webinar. So members will be getting into the system, doing their TCBs, and taking care of all those details. They'll have 2 required live webinars, which I know you all are aware of. They will be doing online field work, including campus tutorials and site-based homework related to where they'll be serving. And then there will be facilitated forums and activities occurring in Moodle. And then to get an idea of how we'll parcel out and create our classes, you see on the right-hand side that we have a little graphic there. At the height, probably likely in summer, we would have up to 600 students in a cohort. And so the group that starts February 22nd is considered a cohort. We'll then divide them into East and West clusters. And for this session, we have 6 classes in each. And then you will be assigned roughly 30 candidates per class. And that will be your students for 5 weeks. And you'll be following them along with webinars. You'll be joining them in breakout sessions on webinars, and we'll learn more about that in just a few minutes. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at roles. And again, I just want to remind folks, if you do have questions, feel free to put those in the chat panel as we go. So since this is a pilot and a brand new project, it is definitely a collaboration between really all hands on deck. You can see that everybody that touches PSO is also involved in this project, from the VISTA training unit, of course, our colleagues Patrick, Andy, Jessica, Eric, and I think there's a new person, Calvin, who's new. And then also the VMSU, as well as the state offices, and then, of course, VISTA supervisors who will be working with these members on site, and your tried and true Ed Northwest team, and you guys are facilitators. To break it down to be a little more specific about the Ed Northwest roles, we are here to support you, as we always are for PSO. So just so you know kind of who's doing what, Kevin Jansen is in charge of the Moodle tech support. So he will be keeping track of questions. And Kevin, feel free to jump in if I miss something. And he'll be helping folks if there are any problems in Moodle around the technology. He's our Moodle master. I will be doing a traditional role of supporting all of you with Facilitator, you know, anything that you might need, scheduling questions, as well as just being here for you. I'll be sharing your successes. I'll be a shoulder to cry on. Pretty much what I like to do for in-person, I'll be doing that for you for this pilot. And then Bethany Dusablin is another Moodle master. Some of you may already know that Bethany has been managing the online college credit courses in Moodle. So she really is our expert in the Moodle system and has been integral in creating all of the support materials for you guys, and you're going to be impressed. We have a lot of stuff to help make this experience a success. Indy is our registrar, so she'll be working with putting students in classes along with Scott. And then she, of course, is in charge of contracts, and we'll talk more about contracts later on. Nancy, Nikki, and Scott are the managers on this project, and they have helped build the technical aspects as well as the curriculum, and they are sort of our all hands on deck, whatever we need. I'm sure they'll be here to help us. I'm looking at Nancy right now. And then myself, Jessica Knight, and Eric Steveotter will also be facilitating alongside all of you so that we can really get an idea of what it takes and how it works, so that we can support you in the future. So that was pretty quick. I'm sure you have lots of questions about roles, and we can certainly get to those as we go. Okay, so we've talked at least in emails a lot about expectations, but I wanted to just go over some of the key expectations briefly. Participate in onboarding is one of them. We are missing a couple people that couldn't make this session, but they will be watching the recording and following up with me afterwards. As we've talked about, attending the webinars and co-facilitating breakout sessions along with state office staff. Responding to student inquiries within 48 hours, which is pretty good. That's about 2 days, so you still get a weekend for the most part. Facilitate Moodle course curriculum and record assignments. And then also just reviewing assignments and ensuring that they're complete. And again, we have more materials to help you with this in the Facilitator Guide. Referring participants to state office staff for questions. And then also using the Facilitator Lounge to document either challenges or successes or questions as we go so that we have that learning community started and available for the future. And then we'll also have a debrief of the pilot experience with the full team, and we'll schedule that a little later on, but that's the final expectation. I want to talk just a little more about the Facilitator Lounge because it's so important. We ask, and again, we'll reiterate this in your training materials, we ask that you post questions about the course in the Facilitator Lounge, as well as any questions you might have about the Moodle technology. That way, we can just go there and look. If I have that question, it's likely someone else may have that question as well. The Facilitator Lounge will also be a place for you to share ideas, as I mentioned, and support each other. So just wanting to give a plug for the lounge, as it'll be our main tool for this community. So I'm going to go ahead and transition to Nikki, who's going to walk us through the course structure as well as some more details about facilitation tasks.
Hi, everybody. We are so delighted that you signed on board with us for this exciting new journey to teach this stuff online. I'm just going to give you a kind of a quick overview of the 5-week experience and particularly the activities that you will collaborate on, and then you will also have a much more detailed facilitator guide that you can dig in on later to get the specific details. But in this 5 weeks, as Amy said, it launches with the Launching Your Vista Service webinar that coincides with day 1 of Vista Service for the participants. We're finalizing the slides for that webinar right now, and we'll share that with you as soon as it's finalized, and it will have scripting for the part that you will collaborate with the Corporation State Office staff on in the breakouts. But just in brief, as part of that breakout, you're going to direct students to Moodle for creating their profile if they haven't done it already, and for accessing the initial 3 assignments that they'll get on day 1 and that will be due at the end of week 2 on Sunday evening. So then you see weeks 1 and 2, they're going to be busy both experiencing their on-site orientation and training with their supervisor and other staff and completing 3 assignments that complement and extend that on-site orientation and training. And those are an inventory assignment, a VAD assignment, and developing a community profile, which is a current tutorial that's in the Vista campus. And when you're playing and doing some self-exploration, it would be a great idea if you take a look at that particular tutorial. So then they come back together on week 3 for the second webinar, which is Accomplishing Your Vista assignment. Has the same group of players as the week 1, and you will also be coordinating with Corporation State Office staff on the breakout for that particular session. And just as with the launching webinar, we'll be sharing slides with you as soon as they're hot off the press for that for you to respond to. And that webinar occurs on Tuesday, week 3 of the service experience. At the end of that webinar, similarly to week 1, you'll just kind of give them a peek at the remaining assignments, which will be a minute intro, kind of modeled a little bit off of the minute message activity in the current resource development session, and a couple of poverty assignments. The minute intro will be due in week 4, and the poverty assignments will be due at the end or the beginning of week 5. And we'll say a little bit more about that later, but you'll also, again, be able to dig into that as you're going through the Moodle course itself and seeing all the notes and all the information that's presented around those. Okay, so I'll move on to the specific facilitation tasks and say a little bit more, and again, they occur in 2 environments, one the Moodle course and the other within the webinars. So within the Moodle course, you're going to create a profile and introduce yourself, share news and updates as they happen with the students, monitor their activity and the completion of required assignments. And we've developed a few guidelines that you'll see in the facilitator guide for what minimum standards for completion would look like. The system will record the uploading of the assignments, but you will be responsible for reviewing that they meet those minimum standards and that they're complete. And there'll be a process by which you communicate to the CSO staff if you have any concerns about that, and we'll reiterate that process in more detail as we finalize it. You'll also facilitate reflection by reviewing and participating, jumping into forum discussions, sending reminders about due dates, and answering any student questions about the curriculum as they arise. Within the webinars, as we mentioned earlier, you'll be primarily present and speaking within the breakout sessions. The plenary sessions will be led by the VTU staff, Andy, Patrick, and the rest of the team. And then you'll be collaborating again with the appropriate state office staff that are tagged to your particular class. Your role specifically will be, you'll be working with the deck that accompanies the breakout session, and you'll have the responsibility to add your own picture to that slide deck and upload those slides when the breakout forms. And Scott can probably say a little bit more about that when we come to that part of the session. And again, similarly to the, both the day one and the week 3, we're going to ask you to kind of prime the pump by, at the end of the webinars, giving them a heads up to the upcoming assignments that they'll find in Moodle. So again, just to kind of reiterate, the synchronous events, the ones that require you to be at a particular computer, not a tablet, but at a computer, a PC or a Mac, at particular times, depending on whether you're assigned to the East or the West cohort, are those 2 webinars on the Monday of week 1 and on the Tuesday of week 3 of service. This first go-round, we're asking you to attend the rehearsal webinars. After you've facilitated a particular course, we won't ask you to do that again, because once you've got it, you'll have it. Unless, of course, we decide to completely change the model after the first pilot, and we may revise that. But right now, we're anticipating beyond this first time, the next time you facilitate, it'll just be those particular 2 webinars without the dry runs. So breakout sessions in WebEx may be new to some of you. They certainly are new to us. So we're going to now turn things over to Scott to dig a little bit more in deeper about how these breakout sessions will work, and then provide a tour of the course in Moodle.
Thanks, Nancy, and hi, everyone. I think I've met or spoken with maybe just a few of you, but it's really nice to talk to you. For those who don't know, I'm the e-learning manager here in Center for School, Family, and Community at Northwest. I'm nowhere near as good as Amy or some of my other colleagues on providing a shoulder to cry on, but that's part of my professional development plan for this year. As Nancy mentioned, there are 2 webinars associated with the PSO Blend that you'll be involved with. The first, which we had previously been calling the Day 1 webinar, is now officially named the Launching Your VISTA Service webinar. That will occur on February 22nd, the first day of service for this group. And then the second webinar, which we had been calling Plan Your Professional Development, is now called Accomplishing Your VISTA Assignment. And as Nancy mentioned, that happens on the Tuesday of the 3rd week of service. So the rehearsals have been scheduled, and I know that Amy sent out those details with the registration links to each of you. We'll walk through more of the session details on the rehearsals. We're not going to do a breakout in this orientation only because we want to record it for future use, and WebEx doesn't allow us to record when we go to the breakouts. We'll, again, as Nancy had mentioned, we'll be providing the decks that you'll be using during the breakout sessions. Your role in terms of prep work will just be to kind of customize those to a degree with your picture. Likely also we'll be forwarding to you the information from the CNCS staff and the state offices, who will also have, as Nancy mentioned, a role to play in those webinars as co-facilitators. So there may be a picture for that person or those folks. And then maybe some content they provide about VISTA projects in their state, which we'll hand on to you to integrate into that breakout session deck that you'll be leading. In advance of the webinars, you'll just need to have kind of finalize those decks with those customizations and have them locally on your computer. Unfortunately, we don't really have any way to preload content in the breakout session, so as the breakout session facilitator, it'll just be like as though you're running your own mini WebEx, where when we go to the breakout sessions, you'll share that file from your computer to the 30 people in your classroom, your breakout session. So there's some more, as I mentioned, there'll be more details about this in the rehearsals, and we'll also share with you later on some kind of screenshots and WebEx documentation on the details of loading content and managing a breakout session. But again, for anyone who's done WebEx before, it'll be very familiar in terms of the functionality. So with that, let me just kind of move over from the synchronous webinar part of things to the asynchronous course in Moodle. I'm going to do a brief tour now of the Moodle classroom. So I'll do that without covering the microphone, hopefully. Okay. Great. So I'm going to do the tour of the course itself, and then we'll hand off to Bethany to do the tour of the Facilitator Lounge. So first the course. When you log into the what we're calling the Vista Campus Blend, and this runs on the Moodle Learning Management System platform, you'll see a brief kind of welcome message, and then below that, the courses you're registered in. Sorry for the overload here. That's because as an administrator, this account is loaded into many courses. You'll just see one box with the actual course section of the PSO Blend that you'll be facilitating. When you click on that, you'll see the course. Right now, I've configured the course so that you're seeing it as a facilitator, but I'll also show what it will look like to a student, because that's a little bit different. On the right-hand side of the page, you'll see latest news. That is where any posts that you add to the news from your facilitator forum will appear, so that it really is highlighted for students who log into the course. You can also see people, and if you click that, you'll get a link of everyone enrolled in the course. And if anyone else was in this course logged in at the same time, you would also see them there so that you could send a message to them in real time. So in this first block of the course, we have the Course Communication Center. Well, first we have links to some key resources for students. One is the Guide to Entering Vista Service, which provides an overview for the student of the Vista PSO Blend course and all of their requirements before their first day of service. And the student guide is more of a technical support guide to some of the functions in Moodle. The Course Communication Center, as I mentioned, there's a forum which as facilitators you can post to. Students can't post to this forum. It's more of a one-way communication, although they can reply to posts that you put there. Then there's a course discussion forum, and that allows posts from from the facilitator or from any students registered in the course. Bethany can provide more information on this, but when you are assigned to your courses, you'll want to log in and go to this discussion forum and subscribe so that you receive notices when people post to that forum. And then finally, there's a technical questions forum, and this is really designed for students rather than facilitators to ask technical support questions about the Moodle platform. Bethany will show you kind of the equivalent technical forum on the Facilitator Lounge side of things. So then we get into the actual kind of main content sections of the site. The pre-service period you won't really need to worry about. This is the work that the Vistas have to do before their first day of service, their online courses that they must complete. So you won't need to worry about that so much. But just to show you what the course briefly will look like to a student. So until day one, the student won't actually see the facilitator news forum, and they won't see any of the sections of the course after the pre-service period, so that it's not something you need to worry about. And since you all won't be as part of your work involved in the course until after that first day. It'll be more of a standalone kind of course for them to focus on their pre-work. And then after that first day is when the course really opens up and they see all of the content areas, and that's where you, as you scroll down, you see all the assignments for the different weeks of the course that Nancy ran through before. You open each section and you see the details. Okay. Just to show you briefly a couple of other features that I think you'll find useful. If you want to send a message to somebody in the course, you can click on the participant list, click on the name of the person, and there's a little message icon here. If you click that, you can send them a message. It'll pop up a notice in Moodle, but it'll also send them an email notice if they've received a message. Cool profile pic, Kevin. And then also, there's a variety of ways that you'll be able to check when students submit assignments. For example, let me just scroll down here to the bad worksheet, which is one of the assignments the student submits. If anybody had submitted an assignment, you'd be able to click this link, go to a list of the people who've submitted assignment, and then actually view the assignment itself. There's also a nice at-a-glance view that will at least tell you who has submitted an assignment, even if it doesn't give you the details of what they submitted. And you'll find that in under the grades link. We aren't, oops, sorry about that. That was the wrong place. Under the reports link, because we aren't actually grading assignments in this course, but there is a quick way to check that they've completed their activities. And if you click on this activity completion link, it'll show everybody who's enrolled in the course, and then it'll show columns for each of the assignments. This first group is all pre-work assignments, but the second part here, these columns, are the assignments that occurred during the first 5 weeks of the course, where we actually track that they've submitted something. So it's a good way at a glance to see who submitted which assignment.
And Scott, can I just add, don't worry about trying to write down the steps right now. Bethany has put the steps for all of these things in the Facilitator guide or the Moodle guide, so you'll have instructions on how to access these reports. Thank you.
Okay. And so I'm happy to answer questions later in the webinar, but let me go ahead and hand things over to Bethany now.
Okay. I'm going to grab that because I'm a low talker. Hi, everybody. It's nice to work with you from time to time. I know all of you, so this is really great. And I think Amy oversold my role a little bit, but I have a little bit of experience with working with the Vista Blend, as you all know, so the other blend, as we're calling the VM and RD courses, not to be confused with this blend. And so one of the things that we've found has worked really well for us is to have a facilitator lounge. So that's a lounge, that is it's considered its own course, where you'll be able to have access to very similar things, but that it will be contained and students wouldn't be able to see any of the stuff that you put in here. This has got specific resources developed for you. They are, because some of the curriculum is, you know, the webinar stuff is still being created, this is going to be something that we're sort of adding to. But what we've got is an announcements and news for facilitators lounge, and that's one that that mirrors the one that's in the course for the students. So you'll get a chance to use that. We also have a facilitator course discussion forum and a Moodle Tech News. So when you're completing, which I'll talk about in a second, we have a sort of a self-directed learning checklist that we want you to go through and try to do all the activities in that so that you can become more familiar with the course and also the Facilitator Lounge. But that will have any tech questions that you have as facilitators, and we want you to put them in this Moodle Tech News lounge here, not lounge, forum here. So what we're going to do is very shortly soon, we'll be sending a link we'll be sending you login information because we're going to load you all up into this, into both the Facilitator Lounge, which is this one, and then also a version of the course that Scott just showed you. So we're calling it the Sandbox, the PSO Blend Sandbox. So you'll have access to the course, a version that no students will be in because we are actually loading students soon into real courses. So you will be able to do some testing, do some reviewing of student assignments. We're going to put some fake assignments. We have some fake students in there. One of them is named Nevin, which is very close to Kevin. And then one of them is named Max Baronstown, which is very close to my son's name. So you'll see some people in there. And so I'm just going to quickly just show you this this training checklist. It's got a few items that we'd like you to take a look at. By the way, and I hope all of you are familiar with Google Docs and using Google Docs, and if you're not, just let us know and we can kind of help you with that. But this is going to be a version that you'll have access to look at, and but not, it's a view only, but you can easily print it out if you want to and have it next to you while you're doing it. So we have some kind of overall activities that we want you to do, such as setting up your account and looking around at the various menus, which I think Scott showed you some of the things. And then we're going to have you actually do these things in some things in the Facilitator Lounge and some things in the PSO Blend course Sandbox, and we'll sort of be checking in. Some of the things you'll have to email to Amy, and some things you'll have to, set up your own profile or, review some assignments and let us know what you think about them, whether they pass, whether they meet standard, acceptable standards for the assignments. So very shortly we'll send you access to that. We're finalizing some of those fake assignments in there today, and so we'll be getting that to you. You'll have the Moodle Guide, which is a document that's created for facilitators, for yourselves, to get familiar with some of the ways that you can interact with the system, with some of the main things that you'll need to be, you may need to do. And so that's something that we put together with some screenshots and some step-by-step stuff that should help you as you get familiar. This is a PSO Blend Facilitator Guide. This is the document that we've been creating. It's, being finished up in work. And this is also a Google Doc that you'll have access to. So it's, very much we're trying to create as clear of a picture as you need for, trying to do the best we can during this pilot. And so we'll also be, dipping in and asking you for your feedback on, maybe some of the guidance that you think you should be giving to students as they, things that work for you this first time around. So this is going to be kind of a living document right now, and but we hope it provides you some guidance that you need to get started. The student guide is the same thing that the students have, so you'll be able to see that and look through it, and then also use it as something that you can refer to students, say on page whatever. You can find out how to change your profile or how to change your digest option for the forums. And then this is something that we've created for you. That's just sort of a quick guide so you know when the things are due. This is just something that we've created for your benefit that will help you kind of tracking those assignments. So, yeah, I think as far as this goes, more to come. We'll be getting you logins very shortly, and then we'll give you access to the Facilitator Lounge with a time when you can start doing, completing the checklist, and then when we'll want you to be finished with that, and sort of those steps to kind of get you started. Is there anything that I'm forgetting, Amy, that you?
No, I would just reiterate that these documents that Bethany has posted here, like the Moodle Guide and the Student Guide, those are really your first sort of go-to when you have questions. I mean, you can ask us questions as well, but definitely take a look at those, and if we have not included the instructions, let us know. That way we can add things as needed. And same for students. Like, you probably should not be answering detailed Moodle questions. Instead, you should be sending students to the student guide so that they can learn how to use Moodle via the student guide. So that's what the documentation's for. It's really job aids for us and for the students.
Yeah, and I think Amy mentioned this too, that we'd like you to gather your questions that you have, or comments or things that you want to bring up or that you're not sure about, related to the course content or some particular activity. Please put them in here, and we'll be monitoring this, and we'll be making sure that we answer those or find the answer for you. Similarly with Moodle questions, please post them, because the more you know, the more you're going to be able to help the students as well. So we'll be monitoring all these forums, so we're set. Kevin, do you have anything to add to the?
No, I don't. I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so we're going to transition back to the WebEx PowerPoint. Just give me 1 second here. So thank you, Scott and Bethany, for providing those tours. You all will have a chance to really look at this material in detail on your own and get familiar with it through the self-study work. So I wanted to just mention some lifelines, both for facilitators and for students. As you can see, we put together a lot of resources for you as well as for the students. We're here for you to help you anytime. Like I said, some of us have facilitated before, and I really did find those materials. I would go to Bethany and say, well, what am I supposed to do for this? And she'd say, go look at your facilitator guide. I put instructions in there for you. So just remember those are there, but I also want to reiterate I'm here for you as well. So you have lots of support helping you out. The guide to entering service for students, I wanted to mention that, this number 1 here. Scott mentioned it as well. It includes all of the details about their PSO Blend experience. It's akin to the welcome packet that they get when they go to in-person. So that is a resource that you will want to take a peek at just to familiarize yourself with it. It also includes key dates, and it's probably something that you might be sending the students to review things about their service, such as fingerprinting details and other sort of nuts and bolts things are listed in the guide to entering service. So that's going to be a good resource for you and definitely for the students. And then also for the students, they have the CSO staff as well as the VMSU staff to support them. Kevin will also be supporting students around any tech issues that they might have, or Kevin and company, all hands on deck on that. So we really do have a lot of different resources in place to support everyone. And you guys know how to get in touch with me. I think everybody has my cell phone number. If it's, something urgent, feel free to call me. In general, let's try to use the Facilitator Lounge to document issues, and if something comes up in a conversation, I'll document it in the Facilitator Lounge as well, and anything that Bethany and I or Kevin or Scott or Nancy, anything that we find, we'll be posting updates in that Facilitator Lounge as we go. I'm looking at Scott. They will get an email when those updates are posted, correct, if it's in one of the forums?
The Facilitator Lounge, the news, I think, did you set that to be for subscription?
The news form is always for subscription. Yeah, okay. So they'll always get notices. Yeah.
So anytime we post a news item, you will get an email in your regular inbox alerting you to that. So I have everyone's emails correct, I believe, but if for some reason the email I've been using is not your favorite email, let me know, because we want to make sure that your most up-to-date email is listed in the course so that it's convenient for you and an email that you check often. Okay, let me see if there's anything else. I think that's the main thing on Lifelines. So let's talk compensation. We did share some of this information before, but I just wanted to go over it briefly again. You will be compensated at the fixed price of $2,600 for participating in the pilot. We ask that you invoice upon course completion, so similar to what you do after a classic PSO, you'll be sending Indy an invoice for $2,600. And then aside from the actual course facilitation contract, you will have an additional 4 hours through the additional hours contract, which is the one that we've been using for pilots and other webinars that you've all attended, 4 hours for that. And so you'll need to also invoice separately from the course invoice. You'll need to invoice for your onboarding activities. And so if you could do that once you're finished with onboarding, that would be fantastic. And that's 4 hours at $66 per hour. And as always, if you have any questions about contracts, Indy is your contact for contracts, so you can get in touch with her. We will be putting contracts together soon and get those out to you guys, so keep an eye out for the course contracts. And then, of course, for the onboarding, that's really up to you to invoice us for those. So you won't receive an actual contract for that. You'll just need to invoice us for the onboarding. Is that right, Nancy? Okay.
Yes, we've already got the contract.
You've already got the contract set up for this year. Okay, so just a few reminders and next steps. Bethany covered many of these already. We will be sending out soon an email with your login details as well as a link to access the PSO Blend Moodle site, which will be your gateway into the courses, the sandbox, as well as the Facilitator Lounge. Within the lounge, as Bethany showed you, there will be a self-study checklist that will take you through both the lounge as well as the sandbox, which is the sample course. And you'll have a chance to try out various activities as you go. I think that's everything. So I am going to go ahead and check the chat section for questions, and we can also open up the phone lines for questions as well. Let me first start with the chat to honor the questions that came in early on. So Jen wrote, how are breakouts determined, for example, criteria for match with a particular facilitator, or is it just totally random? And Mike followed up with, it'd be great if he could have students from his area. So I'm looking at Nancy for this one. Nancy, how are students going to be chosen? Do you know?
As Amy overviewed, a cohort is a group of up to 600 that starts on a particular pay period. Then they're divided into 2 clusters now that are groups of the previous clusters. And let me see if I can get it right. I believe it's Pacific and Southwest go to the Western cluster, and then Atlantic, North Central, and Southern go to the Eastern cluster. Within that, I think as we get more familiar with how this work plays out, we may be able to make finer assignments of you to particular clusters. I think right now we are trying to follow kind of your time constraints. So some of you were assigned to East or West cluster based on when you could be available for those webinar times. But I think as we get into it a little bit further, we may be able to make more distinctions in the assignments. Right now, we need quite a bit of flexibility. As you can imagine, also still needing to staff PSO Classics and having some overlap between blend classes and PSO classes, we're going to have to retain some flexibility in those assignments, and cannot promise, say, Mike, that you can get the Seattle cohort at this particular time, though. I think over time, as we get more familiar with this stuff, we'll do our best.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and unmute the phone lines in case anyone has a follow-up question for Nancy. So if you're crunching chips right now, it's probably a good time to set those aside. I'm going to go ahead and unmute. You can mute yourself by right-clicking on the phone icon next to your name. So I'm going to unmute and just see if there's any follow-up questions for that particular student assignment one. Okay, everybody's unmuted. Any follow-up around student assignment?
Amy, I do. This is
Jen.
Will it help that, the facilitators have good working relationships with the state office staff, or it doesn't even matter?
Of course it will help. Right now, we're not entirely sure how the state office staff will be assigned to Breakout when there are groups of states that are clustered in one Breakout. So, the smaller states, Jen, sometimes get kind of clumped together. We're hoping to get as much notice as possible so that you'll know, and then I imagine over time we can do more, as I said earlier, intentional linkage of you with particular state office staff with whom you are familiar.
I may just add just one kind of little note from the conversations I've had with Andy. I think their intent is to group the classrooms by state for the most part. So, for example, I think it's likely that California would have its own, the larger states would have their own classes. Others, as Nancy mentioned, will kind of maybe group several states together. There may be some outliers, though, where they want to keep people in national projects together, regardless of where they're serving, I think based on where the national project is managed out of in terms of which state office. So there'll be a little bit of discrepancy in terms of, who's in your classes and where they might actually physically be located.
Will we get that list before the webinars and their service and everything like we used to get in the hard copy?
Good question. We certainly can provide a list of the students' names and their email addresses. I'm not sure what other, we're waiting for the list right now from Vista, so I'm not sure what other details it will contain, but I'm sure we can do that to provide you some insight into who will be in your classes.
Okay.
But I do want to reiterate that we do want to use the Moodle system for emailing students versus our personal email accounts. So yes, as soon as we have your classes ready, we will share your student list with you. As with in-person PSO, I'm guessing things are still in a little flux on recruitment. I could be wrong, but we'll get you those lists as soon as we have them. Any other questions about groupings of students or cohorts or anything like that before we move on? Okay, great. So Ellen had a question about the name of the student guide, wondering if student would be resonate with our vistas and if maybe participant would be better. And I'm just going to throw that out to the group. Nancy, I don't know if you want to have thoughts.
I think it's a great suggestion, quite frankly.
That's a good point.
Now, in the Moodle environment,
it's a great suggestion, but right now it says student guide in dozens of places, so we may take it under advisement for a future iteration.
By the next, in a later revision, you may see this changed.
That sounded very lawyerly. But yeah, that is a good suggestion.
Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, we're writing down all these ideas, and these are exactly the kind of tips and suggestions that will make it better the next time around. So we're glad to have you guys in the pilot and that you're already thinking about how to personalize this. So that's wonderful. Okay, so Amy was wondering, will we see expectations that vistas are held to for minimum participation? And if they are not meeting expectations, who do we go to? So I'll start to answer this, and then Nancy can jump in or others. We have listed minimum expectations as far as we know them at this point in the facilitator guide. As we move through, I'm sure things that we have not thought about will emerge, and we will share those with you in the news forum, which means you'll get an email when things come up. And then as far as holding them accountable, Nancy, do you know how that's going to be?
Yeah, we're going to clarify with Patrick and his team tomorrow who you give the heads up to if you're concerned about any particular individuals and the completion to standard of their assignments. But I wouldn't say it's a pretty low bar we're expecting, but once you see this facilitator guide, we're looking for basic completeness and responsiveness to the assignments, but not a detailed rubric or anything that you would be grading.
Great. So more information to come on that. I heard yesterday it's probably going to be the CSO staff person assigned to your class, but we'll verify that and let you know for sure. And that will be documented in the facilitator guide. There's a whole section about roles and who to call for what, so that'll be in there. Any other, I haven't read through the whole list yet, but any other questions around expectations that you guys have related to this one?
There was a thing about calendar.
Okay, and then also from Amy, is there a calendar you can send us that shows all the dates and times for the webinars so you can make sure they're listed correctly? Yes, so we will put those, I'm looking at Bethany, I think we can put those in the checklist. Yeah. It's in there. So Bethany put together an awesome checklist for you. She briefly showed it to you. It's in the Facilitator Lounge, and that includes all the times and all of the assignments. When I was facilitating resource development, I used my checklist to make sure that I looked at everything for that particular week. So I think you guys will find that really handy.
Does that one have rehearsal webinar times on it too?
No.
Did you get that?
We can add the rehearsals to that as well. Just be aware that your time for your live webinar, not the rehearsal, but the live webinar will shift depending on if you're in the East cohort or the West cohort. All of the rehearsal times for the webinars, it's just one rehearsal. There's no East or West. But we will get that into the checklist for everybody. And Jess has a question.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. For all the times, are both cohorts going to be operating in the Eastern time zone, or is one Pacific and one? Okay.
But there's only one cohort. There's only one cohort per day, start day of service.
Right.
So I think you're referring to clusters, East and West clusters.
Yeah. Okay.
They've got one start day, and they.
But so the like assignment deadlines and things will be operating for the time zone, the corresponding time zone, but not for all the like mountain and central.
We're, maybe I'll let Kevin or Bethany speak to this. I think we're a little bit looser than that in terms of the actual times that are built into the Moodle system. It may be that that's set to Pacific time because we're hosting it ourselves.
I think we put, the assignments are due either Sunday evenings or a Monday for the last assignment. And I think we stuck on there Sunday evening at 11 Pacific being the submission time, thinking that you as facilitators would then look at these on Monday, not that you're going to need to look at them at 11:30 on Pacific. No, it's, you know, and then we'll also clarify with you late policies because I suspect that we'll need to refine the late assignment policy. Right now it's a little mushy.
Any other questions about timing of due dates or webinars? Okay, I have a little, I think I shared it with you guys that I keep a time zone map next to my desk, and that really helps me a lot. So that can be useful. Okay, so Amy was wondering. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Ellen. I have one quick question. Does a late assignment affect their grade, or is that a judgment call on our part?
I'll just take a stab at this. This is a pass-fail system. So, for example, if they don't show up, if they haven't done their pre-work, they don't start day one. They get deferred to a later start date. The 5 assignments that I think you're going to be shepherding, we're looking for completion, and we'll clarify late policy. It's so TBD about late policy.
And I believe, I'm looking at Bethany, that the late policy will be documented in the student guide as well as the facilitator guide. Is that usually how we do it?
I think we're going to have to figure out where to document it for the students because the student guide is really focused on
okay.
functionality. So, and we don't currently have a course syllabus. That's usually where in the VM and RD classes we list that in a syllabus type place. So I think we'll have to figure out a late policy once it's figured out and where.
This is Ellen again. Thanks for figuring it out. It's probably one of the most fluid things when instructing online, and everybody relates to it differently. So it'd be great to have the long view, but also some good clarity about it.
Yep.
Thanks, Ellen.
Good point.
Let's see, Amy had a question about, are there ways that you can suggest to help us introduce ourselves to the vistas either before or at the beginning so we can begin to develop relationships with our 30 people? So the first time that you will interact with students will be on the webinar on February 22nd. Now I'm messing up, 22nd. And that's when you will meet your students in the breakout session. So you'll have a chance to introduce yourself. The CSO person will introduce themselves. And that's really when you start to build that relationship. Beyond that, I think those sort of little details are emerging. And if you have ideas or tips or strategies, we welcome you to share those in the Facilitator Lounge.
Yeah, and we've sort of, though we don't require it, we think it's a good policy is to, to send a sort of a follow-up email on that after that day one webinar, just to introduce yourself again and, reiterate anything you need to. And we're kind of developing sort of some things we think you might want to mention in those day one emails. But yeah, sort of the, you've talked to them in the webinar and then you're following up with something online in the forum, in the Moodle system. So.
Thank you. Actually, that was what I was referencing. This is Amy. Like in some kind of an email format once we have that initial webinar. I thought it'd be nice if we could just follow it up with a few. One, just to welcome them and encourage them to ask us questions if they have them, and two, just to tell them a little bit more about ourselves.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things on the checklist that we want you to do.
Great.
Draft a, what would you say to new vistas? You guys are probably very used to introducing yourself to vistas, so it might come pretty easy to you. And then maybe you guys can share ideas with each other about what might be good things to include in that.
So, for example, I think your breadth and depth of either service experience or training service participants or something related to your passion or connection to lifelong service, all of you have, I think would be a great thing. But that would be, personalized by you because it's all very distinctive.
It's kind of trying to think about also like how to replicate some things like, the 7 Things activity is, I always think is so great because it allows you to get to know people on their terms and get them to know you on your terms. And if there was something like that in an email follow-up that we could do with them, I just thought that would be a nice way to start to break the ice.
Yeah, great suggestion. I will say that you will all find, once you get into this curriculum, that it does not mimic everything that's in the PSO.
Yeah, I figured.
And, yeah, quite frankly, it was impossible to try to pack it in and have people come out the other end enrolled and successful at the end of the 5 weeks since they're already serving. You may see some good things like the fact that they can talk to their supervisor on site or interview folks. There'll be more integration of the site experience with the curriculum than obviously we could do with PSO. But yeah, you will feel some losses, I think, from the in-person to the Moodle environment.
So I just want to do a quick time check. I know it's noon. It looks like we still have some other questions. If folks need to jump off the call, we are recording the session, and you could skip to the end of the recording to get any of the other question and answer period if you need to go. If you can stay, that'd be great. We can stay, and so we'll just continue to answer questions and try to get through all of them. Okay, thanks for that, Amy. Mike had a question about as we develop the model relationships over an extended period of time, we can get at pairing our group participants with other facilitators in other regions when specific questions come up. that folks in their community would be more equipped to answer. And I'm going to send this one to Nancy.
Sounds great. Let's see how it develops over time. I mean, I think, you know, we're also trying to, part of this model connects them more intentionally with their supervisor, their site staff, and their state office. So those will be primary resources to them during this 5-week period.
In practical terms, and as far as the communication tools built into Moodle, just to be upfront, those are pretty siloed, so people see and interact with their classroom group and their assigned facilitator, but they don't have access to the forums to chat with facilitators assigned to other groups.
And I just want to reiterate, and Nancy, jump in if I'm missing the boat here, that, you know, just like with in-person PSO, you are not obligated to stay in touch with these folks after your 5-week service period ends. In fact, we encourage you to let them move on to work with their supervisors or their state offices. So don't feel like you have to help them out for the entire year. Okay, so Shoshana is asking if we have concerns about any student special needs issues, is the state office our best contact? And yes, the state office will be your contact about special needs or issues, just as they would for the in-person PSO. So you'll probably be working pretty closely with the state office person that's assigned to your class, would be my guess. Any follow-up questions about that at all?
Well, and I mean, it just, we do have students in the VM and RD courses who do have some special needs related to sort of being able to maybe have like a visual impairment or some kind of learning disability. So we do have some, you know, things that we can do in that area as far as accessibility, but if it's something that the state office determines needs to be taken care of in a face-to-face kind of situation, because some of those people could be referred to a face-to-face PSO if such a thing exists.
Yeah, right now they're trying to target those with limited English proficiency or limited connectivity or other special needs to go to the classic PSOs, particularly while this pilot gets shaken out. There won't be alternate models. For example, we will not be building a model in Spanish right now. It'd probably be the end of the year, you know, if we tackle it then.
And I think, too, just as you know, the RTLs usually share with me during classic events any issues that come up around students and their needs or members, candidates, et cetera. So feel free to let us know. That facilitator lounge is really just for us, staff and facilitators. So if something's come up that I should know about, please let me know. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing it in the lounge, you can always call me or send me an email directly. Okay, so Mike was asking about headsets for using with WebEx. I have used many different headsets. I don't know if anybody has recommendations around that.
I don't necessarily have a specific model recommendation. You know, generally just kind of going on Amazon and finding a USB headset mic. I think the brands that I've had most luck with, Plantronics usually makes one that you can get for like $30 or so on Amazon, like a USB headset mic, microphone mic. Yeah, with an A, Plantronics. Sennheiser makes some decent ones too. They usually run about $20 or $30 more than the equivalent Plantronics models. So I don't know what you're using currently, Mike, but I hope that helps.
Okay, and the checklist, we will get that updated for you. I'm glad people are excited about that. Dee Dee wants to know, how are we evaluated by participants? That's a good question, Dee Dee. We have put together some evaluation questions for participants to provide feedback on their facilitator. I don't have those in front of me right now. I'd be happy to share them with you guys so you can take a look at them, and I'll put that on my list. Okay, great. So Bethany's going to add the facilitator eval questions to the facilitator guide, and then beyond that, Nancy, go ahead.
Yeah, beyond that, this pilot will be evaluated externally by ICF International, and that may include them asking questions about the facilitators of participants or students. I don't know that they'll go that far. They may also contact you to ask you questions about implementation. They're going to be looking at learning outcomes across Classic and PSO Blend and see which ones are met, you know, more fully or better in one format or the other. So anything that's to do with facilitator evaluation, as soon as we know that it's coming down the pipe, we'll let you know.
Any other questions about the evaluation, either the facilitator evaluation or the largest scale evaluation? Okay, great. Shoshana asked about students being able to include photos, interests, factoids, etc. Yes, they will have a profile in Moodle similar. It's the same profile, I'm guessing, I'm looking at Scott, as you guys will have. So you'll get to see what can be included in the profile, and you can get pretty detailed. Uploading a photo is one of the things that we recommend that you do, either of yourself or a representation of yourself, and students will be, I think, directed to do the same. Okay, and Mike, you have a question about using video. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. So there aren't plans currently to use video, for example, in the webinars. It'll just be chat and you know, probably voice in the breakout rooms. As far as video in Moodle, we haven't, the only kind of instance we currently plan for video would be tied to one of the assignments that the members are asked to do, that minute intro. We give them an option to take a video of themselves delivering their intro and post it to YouTube, and then either post a link or embed it in when they submit the assignment in Moodle. So yeah, you can wear your PJs to your webinars, no problem.
And then I think Nancy alluded to this earlier, we will ask you to put a photo on the slide for your breakout, so they'll at least have a picture of you when you're talking in your breakout and be able to identify your face with your voice. Okay, other questions anybody might have so far? We like to call PJs transitional clothing here. It can either be yoga or workwear, depending. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Last call for questions before we wrap up here. All right, I'm sure you guys will have more questions as we go. We seem to be coming up with questions every day. It's a new day, a new experience for everyone. I think we're all learning a lot. And again, I want to thank you all for being willing to do this. And I know some of you just joined our team yesterday, so thank you for your flexibility. And we just look forward to making this great and having a successful year with this new endeavor.
Thanks for being willing to sign up with us.
Okay, keep an eye out for your login details coming within the next day or two, and we look forward to seeing how this goes. I'm here for you if you need to get in touch with me at any point. And thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.